everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about Dodge CEO Matt McAlear and his recent appearance on the Inevitable podcast, this podcast that Motor Trend does with, talking about EVs and stuff. He was on the most recent episode, and he kind of hinted at the possibility of an affordable Halo sports car that could be under 30 grand. So it's been basically getting a lot of attention recently. On different websites and stuff. I wrote about it on Mopar Insiders, and he kind of said some very interesting things. We're going to play the whole clip here from the podcast, and then we're going to talk about, what he said, and kind of go through some concept cars from the past. In the last 20 years, Dodge has actually had a lot of affordable sports car concept vehicles. We're going to talk about 3 of them in general. And then we're going to talk about something different, kind of what Matt kind of hints at, and kind of get like an overall take of what Matt's maybe hinting on in the future. So let's take a look right here at the podcast.
Out is something, and again, if, we win when we're different, man, that's about as different as things got. Like, I know there's love internally in the company.
Oh, yeah. But there's a lot of us that love that car.
Yeah.
Me included.
Yeah.
I think there's absolutely opportunity. Is if you look at we said we win when we're different. Mm-hmm. A Halo car at the top end, but also a Halo car at the entry level. I think there's a whole lot of getting back to the basics on just a car to be a car to go out and have fun in. And sometimes that doesn't always have to be. You look at what the power sports industries have done as of late with a lot of these different entry models. There's something to be said for there.
Like little side-by-sides taking over off-roading, yeah.
Yeah, or even the 3-wheel performances. So there's opportunity at the entry level and the upper end of the market. I would love to see something. I think that, we're always looking at what makes sense. But, yeah, the future's going to be bright.
Okay.
So that right there was kind of a weird thing to kind of talk about. He says here, we're looking at what the power sports industry is doing. So if you think about the power sports industry, there's a couple of companies that build these 3-wheeled motorcycles, and one of the most popular ones is Polaris and their Slingshot. Now, Polaris has done a really good job with building some kind of sporty 3-wheelers that are technically motorcycles. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the Polaris, but it's kind of neat that kind of weird in a way that he would, mention the Slingshot in a way, because we're always thinking about Dodge being more traditional automotive. So, but let's talk about some concepts first, and then we'll get more back into this power sports thing. So back in 2002, Dodge released this. This is the 2002 Dodge RZR concept. Now, you might notice I just updated this article on Mopar Insiders. This car came out in 2002 at the North American International Auto Show in Detroit. It gained a lot of attention. And it wasn't just because of its retro styling. It was because it was basically what Dodge and Jeep did that year was they introduced basically 3 concept vehicles that were supposed to be affordable, and all 3 were supposed to be under $16,000. So that was the interesting part. So we got the Dodge M80, which was supposed to be an affordable pickup. We got the Jeep Compass, which was supposed to be a cheap mainstream off-roader, and obviously that completely changed going into 2007, so we got a completely different model. But and then we got this was the RZR, and the RZR was just different. It was kind of like a Miata kind of sports car, very small, but it had this kind of 50s kind of 60s sport coupe kind of styling. Looked very aggressive, and out of all the 3 cars, this was supposed to be the cheapest one. So what Dodge originally said their targeted price was $14,500 if they were to bring this to market. So $14,500. If you adjust it for inflation, 23 years later, this vehicle would be basically about $25,900. So $25,900 in today's money with inflation. Now, what really set this car apart was its performance attributes. If you look at what it is, so it's rear-wheel drive, it's a little sport coupe, 2-door, like I said, like a Miata. But if you look at what it had under the hood, it was very interesting because this is 2002. In 2003, we got the Dodge Neon SRT4. and that thing was the most bang for your buck vehicle you could buy in America in 2003. But this has the same exact engine in it, so it's the 2.4 liter turbo 16 valve twin cam inline four. And what was really cool about it, where the Neon SRT4 would come out the next year and have 215 horsepower, and then the following year would get 230. This one was massaged to have 250 horsepower, and it had 230 foot-pounds of torque. So if you think about it, this car only weighed in at 2,500 pounds or 1,134 kilograms, and could do 0 to 60 in under 6 seconds. And that's with a 6-speed manual transmission, and it had a top speed of 140 miles an hour. And that was very serious sports car territory back then. I mean, that would have just stomped the bejesus out of the Miata. So it gained a lot of people's interest. If we look at the interior was really cool. It had this really retro look to it. Kind of looked very 50s. It had a lot of aluminum touches, a rear view mirror that kind of hung on the dash instead of being up. Just a passenger car. And a lot of people really liked the interior on it. But what really kind of stood out and how it got its name was, if you look in the back, in this one picture, if you look behind the back seats, you'll see a Razor scooter in there. Well, at the time, Razor scooters were like all the craze. Everybody had one. My little sister had one at the time. And Dodge partnered with Razor. And if you look at the logos on the side of the car, or even the interior footwells of the car, the logos for the Razor is actually the Razor logo scooter, or scooter logo. So it's got that same font. So yeah, it was a partnership between Razor and Dodge at the time, and it just got so much attention, even after it was done on the auto show circuit. The very interesting thing was it went to, for a couple of years actually, it sat at the Walter P. Chrysler Museum in Auburn Hills on the Chrysler Technical Center campus. And the really cool part was, it was right when you walk in, they had this pedestal that would actually move up and down, and it would take an hour for each car to go up, and then another hour for them to come down. And that car was constantly on that pedestal, and it got so much attention even after. I remember everybody would flock to that car, that bright orange paint and everything. It was one of the most eye-catching concept cars from Dodge during the 2000s, and a lot of people love this little car, and they really wish they would have built it. But unfortunately, it just never happened. So, kind of disappointing, but still one of the most popular cars of the early 2000s from Dodge. Then fast forward 2 years, we got this thing, and this was basically a European release. Dodge was really trying to get into the European market at the time because of the whole Daimler Chrysler thing, and they introduced the 2004 Dodge Slingshot concept. Now, I have to update this article because I actually have better pictures of this thing, but I'm going to show you some photos. And it was a very tiny car, and a lot of people don't know this, but it's actually based on the Smart Roadster. And if you've ever seen the Smart Roadster, it is one of the ugliest freaking cars that ever hit the road. It was not that good looking car. But the Dodge designers went through and actually made it look pretty reasonable. Powertrain's the same. So when we talk about powertrain with this thing, it is very lackluster. Unfortunately, it got a little 3-cylinder gas engine, 100 horsepower, 0 to 60 time, about 10 seconds. Had a 5-speed manual transmission, rack and pinion steering, 4-wheel independent suspension, disc brakes, and all that stuff. But they boasted that it was going to be fun and to drive and responsive and stuff, the performance just wasn't there, and it got 45 miles per gallon. But you know what? If for Europe that might have been fine, but not anybody really remembers this car because nobody really cared about it. It was just one of those concepts that showed up, and not anybody really liked it. So it was kind of like just pushed to the side, but it does look better than the Smart Roadster that it's based on. So that was a plus for Daimler Chrysler. Then we fast forward to 2007, and we got this really cool Roadster. Now, I took this picture right here, the cover photo for this article, back in 2014 at the Dodge 100th anniversary event. They brought out all the Dodge concept cars to the Meadowbrook Mansion, which was John Dodge's widow's mansion that was actually just like half a mile from the Chrysler Technical Center in Auburn Hills. And I got a really good chance to look up the car in person. I mean, I seen it on the auto show circuit when I was a kid, and it was so different to actually see it, 7 years later. And, actually getting time to like look at the design. So the car was actually very attractive up front. It looks like a mini Viper, very angular, looks kind of mean. And I mean, if you look at this overall shape of this car, here's a couple pictures of it driving in Royal Oak, Michigan. These were press photos from Dodge. But you look at it, and it looks really good up until the the actual back part of the doors. And then it gets like this bulbous look. So the car looks like it's almost like two cars in one. At the time, two-door performance coupes were really getting popular. So in 2004, we seen Pontiac and Saturn release their the Pontiac Solstice and the Saturn Sky. So GM was really pushing these little Mazda Miata fighter cars, and everybody loved them. So like at the time, little four-cylinder powered cars, six-speed manual transmissions, rear-wheel drive, and at the time, it was hard to find one because everybody was buying them up, and they were under 30 grand. It was a super popular option that kind of continued into like 3 years after, to the point where Dodge was like, hey, we want to jump in on this. So they introduced the Demon concept. Now, what's different about this car is under the hood is a 2.4 liter engine, but it's the World engine, which a lot of people really aren't happy with, but it was kind of a dog kind of an engine. But it did produce 172 horsepower, and it wasn't like the best performing car, but it had a 0 to 60 time of 7.1 seconds. It had a 6-speed manual transmission to it, and would have done good against the base model Solstice and Sky cars, but they got turbocharged models not that long after that, and it just would have devastated this car big time if they would have came to market. If we look at the interior of the Demon, the very interesting part about this interior is it looks production ready. I mean, if you see concept cars, they usually have some stuff that looks way advanced. This car doesn't. You look at the actual vents in the dash; those are right out of the Jeep Compass in the Jeep Patriot. You look at the actual stereo. That stereo was a very common bass stereo in even the Grand Caravan, the Compass itself, Patriot. All those models, the 200, or not 200, but the Sebring, all that stuff. So, I mean, that stereo was used in almost every Chrysler vehicle. You look at the switchgear, the window switches, they're right from, the parts bin. You look at the door handles, parts bin door handles. A lot of this stuff was carryover, and it looked like, hey, they could literally make this. Had a sporty 3-spoke steering wheel. Basic gauges, the gauges were obviously shared from the Compass and Patriot as well. But overall, it looked like a really nice interior. It was ready for production. Let's just put it that way. If you look at the back of the car, that's when it gets kind of crazy. And I said I was not a huge fan of this car. It goes from being really nice and curvy to this really bulbous, like almost looks like a ripoff of an Audi TT. And a lot of people I remember people making comments about this on the forums and stuff back in the day, and they were complaining about how ugly the back was on it. But this was supposed to be a big deal for Dodge, and unfortunately, this car came out in 2007, mid-year, and before it could even really, get greenlit, that's when the automotive industry took a major hit, and that's when Chrysler not Chrysler Corporation at the time, but Chrysler Group ended up going basically fighting for bankruptcy or filing for bankruptcy protection, and just like GM at the time. So that Pontiac Solstice and Saturn Sky were discontinued after the federal government came in to bail out both automakers, and because they discontinued the Pontiac brand and the Saturn brand because they said GM had too many brands. Unfortunately for Dodge, I mean, when your competition gets rid of their car that you're really, interested in going after, and you have to make cutbacks in order to pay for, your bailout money, this car was discontinued, or at least it wasn't even greenlit. It was just like, hey, we're not building it. So, I mean, it could have been something really cool. It could have been affordable. It could have been, a little mini Viper for people, on the weekends. But unfortunately, it just never happened. So, those are 3 concepts that, within the last 20 years that, or 23 years, I should say, that Dodge has shown off that, hey, there is a market that they really have been looking at, for affordable sports cars, and they could do it. There's a lot of it wouldn't be that hard for them to actually go and do something like this. But if we go back to what Matt said, Matt clearly said that they're looking at the power sports industry, and kind of taken away from these radical vehicles. And you might think like, well, Dodge is a car brand. They've done crazy stuff in the past. I mean, a lot of people don't remember the 2003 Dodge Tomahawk motorcycle concept. Now, the reason why I bring this up is a lot of people who are motorcyclists, including myself, say this isn't a motorcycle. It's actually got 4 independent wheels. It looks like it's 2, but they actually are independent of each other. But this thing was crazy. It was basically a Viper V10 with 4 wheels to it. This thing was crazy. Well, it wasn't heavy to the means of it was heavier than a normal motorcycle, but it was not heavy considering that it was a Viper V10 with 500 horsepower, and theoretically it had a top speed of over 300 miles an hour. So this was a cool concept. It came out at the 2003 North American International Auto Show, and it still gained a lot of attention from everybody. It didn't matter if you were in the motorcycle press. It didn't matter if you were in the automotive sector. Fans of both motorcycles and cars, everybody loved this thing. It looked mean. It was this Art Deco kind of thing. And the very interesting part about this concept was later that year, you might know the Neiman Marcus Christmas catalog. Every year they put the Neiman Marcus catalog together, and they always do something crazy, like absolutely crazy. So they might have like a Bugatti on there for like $8 million or something that's like, encrusted with some kind of like diamond jewel clock or something, just something stupid crazy. Well, that year, I actually have pictures of it and I'll post them here. They introduced the Tomahawk as a thing that you could buy. And if you read the Neiman Marcus thing, it goes through the description about how it's an Art Deco piece and stuff. So even if you bought this, it wouldn't be, street legal. It would be more of a art, piece of art. But they were willing to sell up to 10 of these at $555,000 a piece. So what's weird about that is the fact that, we've heard rumors that they sold all 10. We heard rumors that they sold 3. But no matter who I've talked to, there is no official person that can prove any documentation of how many were actually sold. So we don't know if none of them were sold. We don't know if the rumor of 3 of them being sold were right. And we don't know if all 10 were sold. I have never seen one of these things pop up in any kind of auction or anything like that. So, it's kind of hard to say how many are actually out there, if there is any. But nonetheless, it was kind of cool. You could go out and buy a replica concept vehicle from Dodge. And if you read the disclosure at the bottom, it says that Neiman Marcus is working as an authorized agent to sell this vehicle. So, meaning that it was actually coming from Dodge. So, kind of a neat kind of little history thing. So, it shows that Dodge can do some really radical stuff that doesn't have to be a car necessarily, okay? If you go to what Matt was saying, if we look at the Polaris Slingshot, right? The Polaris Slingshot is a pretty cool vehicle. Now, in recent years, it's been updated. Now it's got a touch screen. It's got, more weatherproofing. You can get an actual enclosed roof for it and a higher windshield, so it's more car-like. But it's a 3-wheeled, vehicle that has a 4-cylinder engine in it. Originally, all it came with was a manual transmission. Now, again, you get an automatic transmission. It just depends on how much you want to pay for it. It starts out about $25,000, can go up to like $35,000, and that doesn't include options. So, it's got a little 4-cylinder engine in it. So maybe Dodge is looking at building something like this with maybe removable doors and stuff like that. That would be kind of cool. Have a little 3-wheeled car. We don't know. So, maybe they're looking at doing something like that. And the cool thing about if they were to do something like this, something really radical, because it's badged as a motorcycle, because it's a 3-wheeled vehicle, there's a lot of things that they could do, and they wouldn't be held down to crash test standards and stuff like that compared to what they were to build a sport, actual sports car. If they did something like this, they could keep the price even down farther. So we might see something that would kind of combat this. So just something to keep in mind. You know, Dodge has shown that they could do a lot of different things, and hopefully with them thinking like this, we might see something kind of radical or something at least affordable. I mean, we've talked about it. Stellantis only has one vehicle under 30 grand, and unfortunately, you know, it's just one trim model, like trim level of the Jeep Compass. You know, they're working at, I heard that Dodge is working at bringing the price down again of the Hornet to be under $30,000 for a starting price, and we might see that very soon. But, you know, it's just right now, Stellantis needs products that are fun, affordable, and something that somebody wants. So a vehicle like this might be just what Dodge needs, you know, to get people in dealerships to talk about the brand on a positive note. I mean, we know that there's been a lot of backlash about the Dodge Charger Daytona and how its performance has been, you know, with the whole EV thing. And people hate it because it's a muscle car that's an EV, and other people hate it because it's not EV enough. So hopefully something kind of radical would shake up, you know, the Dodge brand a little bit and kind of, you know, bring people into the dealerships. So just something to think about. But nonetheless, it's good to hear that they're looking at affordable options of things for once. So hopefully we'll see something maybe in a couple years down the road. I would be very impressed if we did. So we really do need to lower the prices of all of Stellantis' vehicles. They're just crazy, still crazy high, even with incentives. So, all right, make sure to hit subscribe if you like this video. Make sure to check out Mopar Insiders on a daily basis. There's 3 to 4 articles a day on there. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.